Hello everyone. In this video, me and my friends will explain about a chapter called Introduction to Engineering Professions. Before I get started, let I introduce you to two of my friends.
Assalamualaikum. Hi everyone. My name is Luqman Hakim bin Abdul Rashid.
Hi, Assalamualaikum. My name is Nurul Jannah binti Abdul Aziz.
And my name is Ahmad Ali.
This is our presentation using Prezi. So, what is engineering? Engineering is the creative application of science, mathematical methods, and empirical evidence to the innovations, designs, constructions, operations, and maintenance of structure, machine, materials, device, system, process, and organization. The disciplines of engineering encompasses a broad range of more specialized fields of engineering, each with a more specific emphasis on particular area of applied mathematics, applied science, and type of application. Now, let's see the engineering branches. Engineering is a broad discipline which is often broken down into several sub-disciplines. Also, an engineer will usually be trained in a specific discipline. He or she may become multidisciplines through experience. There are many types of branches in engineering. Let's take a look at one of them. In chemical engineering, application of physics plus chemistry plus biology plus engineering principles in order to carry out chemical process on a commercial scale. Example: manufacture of commodity chemicals, specialty chemicals, petroleum refinings, microfabrications, fermentations, and biomolecule production. Okay, now let's move on to civil engineering. Design and construction of public and private works. Examples: infrastructure, airports, roads, railway, water supplies and treatments, and etc. Bridge, tunnels, dams, and buildings. Civil engineering is traditionally broken into a number of sub-disciplines, including structural engineering, environmental engineering, and surveying. It is traditionally considered to be separate from military engineering. Continue to electrical engineering. Design, study, and manufacture of various electrical and electronic systems such as broadcast engineering, electrical circuits, generator, motors, electromagnetic and electromechanical device, electronic device, electronic circuit, optical fibers, optoelectronic device, computer system, telecommunication, instrumentation, controls, and electronics. Next, to the mechanical engineering. Design and manufacture of physical or mechanical systems such as power and energy system, aerospace, aircraft products, weapon system, transportation products, engines, compressor, powertrains, kinematic chains, vacuum technology, vibration isolation equipment, manufacturing, and mechatronics. These are major branches of engineering. There are other branches recognized. True, many can be taught as sub-disciplines of the four major branches or across curricular disciplines among multiple. Historically, naval engineering and mining engineering were major branches. Other engineering fields are manufacturing engineering, acoustical engineering, corrosion engineering, instrumentation and control, aerospace, automotive, computer, electronic, petroleum, environmental, system, audio, software, architectural, agriculture, biosystem, biomedic, geological, textile, industrial, material, and nuclear engineering. New specialties sometimes combine with the traditional field and form new branches. For example, a system engineering and management involve a wide range of subject areas including engineering studies, environmental science, engineering ethics, and philosophies. Now, let's take a look at what's do and don'ts as an engineer. In this do and don'ts, we can split into 5 categories. The first one is in the registration part. In the registration part, what we can do is an engineer graduate with a accredited engineering degree must register with the Board of Engineers to take up employment as an engineer. What the don'ts is, an engineer should not be submitting person for designing beyond her area of competency. An engineer also should not endorse his PE stamp and sign on reports or plans not prepared by him. An engineer should not enter into partnership with any party not permitted under the Engineers Act. 1.4. An engineer consultancy practice should not provide professional service in any branch of engineering where none of its directors are registered to practice in that branch for engineer. 1.5. An engineer must not practice in the branch of engineering he is not registered in. Now that is settled for the registration part. Moving on to consultancy part. What engineer must do is, first, an engineer should be transparent and receptive to peer review or checking of his work if requested or required by the authorities. Number 2, a checker engineer must be open to the views and design concept of the original designer, and in area of disagreement, the checker must give justification for his disagreement. Number 3, a checker engineer should take full responsibility for the checking of the work himself. Number 2.4, an engineer should undertake continuing professional development to enhance his knowledge and capability. Number 5, an employer engineer should ensure that his employee engineers are engineers registered with BEM. Number 6, an engineer should report unethical practice to BEM. Number 7, an engineer who is submitting person must ensure the accuracy of and responsible for all works delegated to others by him. Number 2.8, an engineer should make optimum use of manpower, materials and money. Number 9, an engineer should be aware of government requirement to use local materials wherever possible. This is the do parts for consultancy. Let's take a look at the don'ts parts. The number 1 for the don'ts part is, a checker engineer should not accept checking of work not within his area of competency as well as work that he is not familiar with. Number 2, an engineer consultancy should not carry out projects for fees below the minimum outline in the scale of fees. Number 3, an engineer should not endorse any works not performed and or supervised by him. Number 4, an engineer should not supplant another engineer. Number 5, an engineer should not compromise on public safety. Number 6, an engineer should not offer his opinion on engineering matter unless he has full facts to support the opinion. Number 7, an engineer should not base his design on substantiated data, for example designing foundation without soil investigation. Number 8, an engineer should not have conflict of interest whatsoever in connection with the work he is undertaking unless prior approval from BEM and client are obtained. Number 9, an engineer should not accept work outside his regular work without the express permission of his employer. Now, moving on to the supervision parts. The do's in supervision parts. Number 1 is, an engineer who is the submitting person should be responsible for the project regardless of whether he is self-supervised and or defeated supervisions. Number 2, an engineer must be meticulously proper and correct in certification of work. Number 3, an engineer must be familiar with and knowledgeable in the work he is to supervise. Number 4, an employer engineer should ensure that his staff undergoes regular and proper skills training. Number 5, an engineer supervising a project should keep proper record of all documents and correspondence pertaining to the projects. Number 6, an engineer must be conversant with time and cost implication in the issuances of any instructions. To the don'ts parts. Number 1, an engineer must not over or under certify progress of works. Number 2, an engineer must not make wrongful certification. Number 3, an engineer must not certify work not within his expertise. Number 4, an engineer must not accept site supervisory staff who are not qualified or incompetent. Number 5, an engineer must not delay approval without justifications. And number 6, an engineer must not intentionally delay inspection of works. Now, let's go to the regulatory requirement. In the regulatory requirement, the rules is number 1, an engineer should notify the relevant authorities within reasonable statutory time limit on changes in designs or withdrawal of services. Number 2, an engineer should submit complete forms in time for inspection and approval for certificate of fitness, certificate of completion and compliance. Number 3, an engineer should be aware of environmental, health and safety matters during and after construction. Number 4, an engineer should ensure that environmental, health and safety measures are implemented as per drawing and specification. The don'ts in regulatory requirement is number 1, an engineer should not allow works to proceed before plans are submitted to and or approved by the relevant authorities. Number 2 is an engineer should not undertake a project for which the client is not going to fulfill statutory requirement. And lastly, to the code of ethics. Ethics mean is to do the right things even when there is no people watching. So it is the do and don'ts on the ethic is the first. Let's take a look at this do. The first point in view is an engineer must be conversant with the code of conduct of engineers. Number 2, an engineer must understand the need for responsibility and liability as stipulated in the code of conduct. Number 3, an engineer must respond promptly to complaints and inquiries by clients or authorities. To the don'ts part of code of ethics. Number 1, an engineer should not tout. Number 2, an engineer should not knowingly mislead the public by giving misrepresented information so as to gain commercial advantage or mileage. Number 3, an engineer should not respond to an open advertisement to bid for provision of professional service if such provision for the service require bidding fees or equivalent as is usually imposed on contractor. Number 4, an engineer should avoid favoritism among vendors and other suppliers.
So, after these do and don'ts that we have provided, and you are interested to become an engineer, and you are asking, how can I become an engineer? What option, what routes did I need to take to become a professional engineer? So, here's a diagram.
So in this diagram, you can see that there is like 4 categories, like 4 steps of routes. The first one is academic requirement. The second one is graduate registration. The third one is training requirement, and the fourth one is professional registration. So in academic requirement, we can see that there is accredited, foreign engineer and unrecognized. And in graduate registration, we can see that there's BEm graduate engineer, IM graduate member, or recognized further learning or top master in engineering top course. In training requirement, we can see that minimum 3 years relevant work experience, logbook scheme. To the professional registration, we can see the professional interview, IEM corporate member, professional engineer tier 1, professional competency examination, and PE with PC tier 2. So you can further look at this. There is like many ways how you can become engineers.
So, after you have known the definition of engineering, you have known the branches of engineering, and you have known the codes, do's and don'ts in engineering, the code of ethics, and you have also known how to become an engineer, and the routes to become one. And you are wondering, why am I need to become an engineer? Why do I did not choose other professions like doctors, lawyers? What is the importance or significance of engineering? To answer this question, we must look back to the history itself. In the history itself, engineering is the core in the advance of the civilizations. So, I will show you a short video from YouTuber called Kurzgesagt. The video will explain a little bit about the history of mankind.
The world we live in feels normal, ordinary. It feels like this is just how humans exist and always existed. But it's not. Never before have we humans lived in a world as sophisticated and engineered to our needs as today, giving us the luxury to forget about ourselves and not worry about survival. Food, shelter, security, all of this is more or less taken for granted. But we're a special few. For more than 99.99% of human history, life was completely different. And there's no such thing as just one human history. Our story begins 6 million years ago, when the tribe of Hominini split and our relationship with the apes ended. 2.8 million years ago, the genus of Homo, the first humans, emerged. We like to think of ourselves as the only humans, but this is far from the truth. When we, Homo sapiens sapiens, came into existence 200,000 years ago, there were at least 6 other human species around. Cousins of comparable intelligence and ability, which must have been incredibly scary, kind of like living with aliens. Some of them were very successful. Homo erectus, for example, survived for 2 million years, 10 times longer than modern humans have existed. The last of the other humans disappeared around 10,000 years ago. We don't know what caused them to die out. Modern humans have at least a few % of Neanderthal and other human DNA, so there was some mixing, but certainly not enough to be a merger between species. So we don't know if our cousins went away because they lost the battle over resources or because of a series of minor genocides. Either way, only we remain. Back to the beginnings of humanity. 2.8 million years ago, early humans used tools but did not make a lot of progress for nearly 2 million years. Until they learned to control fire. Fire meant cooking, which made food more nutritious, which contributed to the development of our brain. It also produced light and warmth, which made days longer and winters less gruesome. On top of that, it not only scared predators away, it could also be used for hunting. A torched wood or grassland provided small animals, nuts and tubers that were pre-roasted. From 300,000 years ago, most of the different human species lived in small hunter-gatherer societies. They had fire, wood and stone tools, planned for the future, buried their dead, and had cultures of their own. But most importantly, they spoke to each other, probably in a kind of proto-language less complex than ours. If we had a time machine, how far would we be able to go back, steal a few babies, and raise them today without anyone noticing that they're a bit different? There is much debate. Anatomically modern humans emerged 200,000 years ago, but probably 70,000 years is as far as we could travel back and still snatch a behaviorally modern human. Before that, the babies would probably lack a few crucial gene mutations necessary to build a brain with modern language and abstract thinking abilities. At some point around 50,000 years ago, there was an explosion in innovation. tools and weapons became more sophisticated, and culture became more complex, because at this point, humans had a multi-purpose brain and a more advanced language to communicate information with each other effectively and down to the last detail. This allowed much closer cooperation and is what really makes us different from any other creature on Earth. Not our comparatively weak bodies and inferior senses, but the ability to cooperate flexibly in large groups, unlike, for example, rigid beehives or intimate but tiny wolf packs. As our brain evolved, we became able to do something life had been unable to do up to this point. 1. Expand knowledge quickly. 2. Preserve the knowledge gained over generations. 3. Build on past knowledge to gain even deeper insights. This seems daft, but until then, information had to be passed on from generation to generation, mostly through genetics, which is not efficient. Still, for the next 40,000 years, human life remained more or less the same. There was little to build upon. Our ancestors were only one animal among many. Building a skyscraper without knowing what a house is hard. But while it's easy to be arrogant in our attitude to our ancestors, this would be ignorant. Humans 50,000 years ago were survival specialists. They had a detailed mental map of their territory, their senses were fine-tuned to the environment, they knew and memorized a great amount of information about plants and animals. They could make complicated tools that required years of careful training and very fine motor skills. Their bodies compared to our athletes today just because of their daily routines, and they lived a rich social life within their tribe. Survival required so many skills that the average brain volume of early modern humans might even have been bigger than it is today. As a group, we know more today, but as individuals, our ancestors were superior to us. But then, around 12,000 years ago in multiple locations, humans developed agriculture. Everything changed very quickly. Before, survival as a hunter and forager required superb physical and mental abilities in all fields from everybody. With the rise of the agricultural age, individuals could increasingly rely on the skills of others for survival. This meant that some of them could specialize. Maybe they worked on better tools. Maybe they took time to breed more resistant crops or better livestock. Maybe they started inventing things. As farming got more and more efficient, what we call civilization began. Agriculture gave us a reliable and predictable food source, which allowed humans to hoard food on a large scale for the first time, which is much easier to do with grains than meat. The food stock required protection, which led to communities living together in tighter spaces. First, early defense structures were built. The need for organization grew. The more organized we got, the faster things became efficient. Villages became cities, cities became kingdoms, kingdoms became empires. Connections between humans exploded, which led to opportunities to exchange knowledge. Progress became exponential. About 500 years ago, the scientific revolution began. Mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry transformed everything we thought we knew. The Industrial Revolution followed soon after, laying the foundation for the modern world. As our overall efficiency grew exponentially, more people could spend their lifetime contributing to the progress of humanity. Revolutions kept happening. The invention of the computer, its evolution into a medium we all use on a daily basis, and the rise of the internet shaped our world. It's hard to grasp how fast all of that happened. It's been about 125,000 generations since the emergence of the first human species. About 7,500 generations since the physiologically modern human saw the light of day. 500 generations ago, what we call civilization began. 20 generations ago, we learned how to do science. And the internet became available to most people only 1 generation ago. Today, we live in the most prosperous age humanity has ever experienced. We have transformed this planet, from the composition of its atmosphere to large-scale changes in its landscape, and also in terms of the other animals in existence. We light up the night with artificial stars and put people in a metal box in the sky. Some have even walked on our moon. We put robots on other planets. We've looked deep into the past of the universe with mechanical eyes. Our knowledge and our way of acquiring and storing more of it has exploded, The average high school student today knows more about the universe than a scholar a few centuries ago. Humans dominate this planet, even if our rule is very fragile. We are still not that different from our ancestors 70,000 years ago, but your lifestyle has existed for less than 0.001% of human history. From here on, there's no saying what the future holds for us. We're building a skyscraper, but we're not sure if it's standing on a solid foundation or if we're building it on quicksand. Let's leave it with that for now. The next time you miss your train, your burger is not hot enough, or someone cuts in line, remember how special this made-up human world is. Maybe it's not worth being upset about all those little things. This video was supported by audible.com/nutshell. In the making of it, we used the book Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind, as one of the major sources. If you want to get to it or any other book for free and support us, go to audible.com/nutshell and get a free 30-day trial. It's so hard to read books when you have the internet, so we can at least listen to them. In general, we listen to a lot of audiobooks while designing our videos, so we can highly recommend Audible. Okay, this was our first take on making a history-related video. We'd love to make much more of them, but they take even more time than our average video. So we might do 3 or 4 a year. Your feedback's very welcome here. Thank you so much for watching, and if you want to support us directly, you can do so on Patreon. It really helps us out. While you think about it, here are more videos if you need more distraction.
Engineering make it possible for people to live more easily and comfortably because we enable people to do more with greater certainty, less effort, less consumption of material resources, and less energy. All that adds up to less costs in any system of economics. Engineers have contributed so much in advance of civilizations. We separate it into 3 parts. The first part is basic engineering. The second part is engineering in ancient era, and the last part is engineering in modern era. Moving on to the first part, basic engineering in old age. As you can see, the tools for hunting and the build of house is the basic engineering that have been there for such a long time. Tools for hunting make it easier for human back then to seeking food by hunting animals, while the house is for providing shelter to them. The designs of tool and house will become more advanced later, but the engineering inside it is what makes engineering is so important. Without it, we may be still live inside a cave, and the failure of hunting increases without using tools. Another thing that we can get from this is the mechanical engineering is the oldest engineering of all times. Back then, people used water wheels, as seen in the picture. A water wheels is a machine for converting the energy of flowing or falling water into useful forms of power, often in a water mill. A water wheel consists of wheel usually constructed from wood or metal with a number of plates or buckets arranged on the outside rim, forming the driving surface. Water wheels were still in commercial use well into the 20th century, but they are no longer in common use. Uses included milling flour in grist mills, grinding woods into pulp for paper making, hammering rough iron, machining, or crushing and pounding fiber for use in the manufacturing of clothes. Next, previous civilizations, they conquer others to make their nation bigger and stronger. This can only be achieved with the help of engineering in their armory sections. The weapon and armor they use can only be achieved with the presence of engineering. Of course, in that time, they did not call them as an engineer, but at that time, if you look back, they can be considered as an engineer in that time. So, the use of sharp weapon and hard armor make their soldiers stronger. This is not only to conquer others' land, but also to defend themselves from intruders in other parts of the world. How can they forge such a sharp and deadly weapon and hard and strong armor is what we can amaze until today. As humans discover new natural resources beneath the Earth's surface, Traditional weapons were replaced as method for metalworking development. Bronze significantly contributed to the ancient world and helped cultures of Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome, Indus, and China flourish. Bronze replaced stones in weapons. During the Bronze Age, maces were in high demand. The Sumerians were the first people on record to have used bronze weapons. Native Americans mostly used flints, spear, and knife. But used bronze for ceremonies and intricate decorations. Ancient artisans soon discovered the drawbacks of bronze for producing armaments. As while weapons made of bronze could be sharpened easily, they were not able to hold their edge. Along with mace, bows, and arrows, and slings were used in war. Bows and arrows was preferred over spear because they were easy to handle, provided greater mobility, were more accurate, and did not require as much raw material. Bow and arrow were a boon for hunters as they could hunt more effectively with bow and arrow than with a spear, and so the bow enabled ancient men to become the most efficient hunter. After the discovery of pure copper in Anatolia around 6000 BCE, copper metallurgy spread in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Around 3500 BCE, the art of metallurgy spread into India, China, and Europe. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tins, have been used as far as back of 4500 BCE. As it is much harder than pure copper, it was usually extensively in Asia. The Indus Valley civilization flourished as a result of improved metallurgy. Neolithic communities who lived primarily in the upper Yellow River in China also used bronze items extensively as a number of artifacts were recovered at the Maggio sites. Bronze were produced on large scale in China for weapons, including spear, pole axe, pole-based dagger axe, composite bows, and bronze or leather helmets. From the excavation at Zhengzhou, it is evidence that the Chinese during the Shang dynasty had well-built walls, large buildings, bronze foundries, and bones and pottery workshop. Now that is for weapons. Now let's talk about armors. Type of armor generally fall into one of three main categories. 1. Armor made of leather, fabric, or mixed layer of both, sometimes reinforced by quilting or felt. Number 2. Mail, made of interwoven rings or iron or steel. And number 3. Rigid armor made of metal, horn, wood, plastic, or some other similar tough and resistant material. The third category includes the plate armor that protected the knight of Europe in the Middle Age. That armor was composed of large steel or iron plates that were linked by loosely closed rivets and by internal leather to allow the wearer maximum freedom of movement. Presumably, the use of armor extends back beyond historical record, when primitive warriors protected themselves with leather hides and helmets. In the 11th century BCE, Chinese warriors wore armor made of 5 to 7 layers of rhinoceros skins, and ox hides were similarly used by the Mongols in the 13th century CE. Fabric armor too has a long history with thick, multi-layered linen cuirasses worn by the Greek heavy infantry of the 5th century BCE and quilted linen coats worn in the northern India until the 19th centuries. The advantage of chainmail is that it is quite flexible yet relatively impervious to slashing stroke. The advantage of chainmail is that it is quite flexible yet relatively impervious to slashing strokes. 2. A thrusting weapon can force the ring apart in spite of their riveted closure in the form of simple shirt. Mail was worn throughout the Roman Empire and beyond most of its frontier, and mail formed the main armor of Western Europe until the 14th century. In Europe, strips of mail were also worn underneath the plate armor to close any gaps left between their rigid plates. Mail shirts were worn in India and Persia until the 19th centuries, and the Japanese used mail to a limited extent from the 14th centuries. Though the rings in Japanese mail were arranged in a variety of ways, producing a more open construction than found in Europe. Mail sleeve, leg harness, and hoods have also been worn. Ancient Greek infantry soldiers wore plate armor consists of cuirass, long glaive, and a deep helmet, all of bronze. The Roman legionary wore a cylindrical cuirass made of 4 to 7 horizontal hoops of steel with opening at the front and back when they were laced together. The cuirass was bulked to a throat piece that was in turn flanked by several vertical hoops protecting its shoulder. Apart from the helmet, armor made of large plate was probably known in Western Europe during the Middle Age. Mail was the main defense of the body and limbs during the 12th and 13th century. Mail hook covers the head and neck, and mail legging covered the legs. Mail, however, did not possess the rigid glancing surface of plate armor, and as soon as the latter could be made responsive to the movement of the body by ingenious constructions, it replaced mail. Thus, plate armor of steel superseded mail during the 14th centuries, at first by local addition to knees, elbow, and shins, until eventually the complete covering of articulated plate was evolved. A complete suit of German armor from about 1510 shows a metal suit with flexible joints covering its wearer literally from head to toe, with only a slit for the eyes and a small hole for breathing in the helmet of forged metal. The armor suits of royalty and aristocrats were often elaborately gilded and etched and embossed with fine decorations. In the 16th and 17th centuries, improvement in hand firearm forced armorers to increase the thickness and therefore the weight of their products, until finally plate armor was largely abandoned in favor of increased mobility. Armor cuirasses and helmet were still used in the 17th centuries, but plate armor largely disappeared from infantry use in the 18th centuries because of its cost. It lost effectiveness against contemporary weapons and its weight.
Now, my part in basic engineering have finished. I'm gonna pass this session to my friend Lokman to explain more about engineering in ancient era.
Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. For engineering in ancient era, I want to talk about several wonders of the world. Actually, there are a few types of several wonders, such as several wonders of underwater world. For example, Palau Island and Galapagos Island. Several wonders of nature world. For example, Komodo Island and Jeju Island. And lastly, several wonders of natural world. For example, Grand Canyon and Mount Everest. Several wonders of the world refers remarkable construction by human or nature. It is called wonder because of magnificence of their creation. New several wonders has different from time to time, and it is divided by 3, which is number 1, several wonders of ancient world from year 484 to 305 BCE before Common Era, and number 2, several wonders of medieval world from 19th to 20th century, and then number 3, several wonders of modern world, which is from 21st century till now. Since our subject and our subtopic is about engineering, so I want to talk about number 1 and number number 1 and number 3, which is 7 wonders of ancient world and 7 wonders of modern world. Before we start, let me share some general knowledge. Why it is 7? Because 7 is thought to be the number for representation of perfection and plenty that was believed by the Greek people. 7 also represent the number of 5 planets that were known anciently, and plus moon and the sun. These wonders are listed by popular guidebook and sightseers, and all the 7 wonders resemble ancient civilization by that time. So let's move to the 7 wonders of ancient world. On the top of the list was the Great Pyramid of Giza. Number 2, the Hanging Garden of Babylon. Number 3 is the Temple of Artemis. Number 4 is Statue of Zeus at Olympia. Number 5, the Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. Number 6, the Colossus of Rhodes. And the last one is the Pharos of Alexandria. The Pyramid of Giza was built 4,500 years ago in Egypt, and yet it remained as the tallest man-made building for until 19th century. That means it stood at its place as the tallest building for 3,800 years. The first and the largest pyramid was built by the pharaoh Khufu. His reign started around 2551 BCE, before Common Era, and his pyramid, which today stands 455 feet. It is around 138 meters tall and known as the Great Pyramid. It is considered to be as one of the wonders of the world by the ancient writers. Facts about the Great Pyramid of Giza. First, it was the oldest and the last remaining of 7 wonders of ancient world. Pyramid Giza was constructed over 20 years period, concluding around 2560 before Common Era. It is located at the city of Giza, a necropolis of ancient Memphis, and today was a part of Greater Cairo, Egypt. It was 30 times larger than the Empire State Building. The pyramid features are so large they can be seen from the moon. The Great Pyramid is thought to be constructed of over 2 million stone blocks that range from 2 to over 50 tons. Though it remains mystery as how they were transported. Historians estimate that over 100,000 people were involved in the construction of the pyramids of Giza, and they may not have been slaves as one thought, but rather paid workers. Pyramid Giza is built as the tomb of 4th dynasty Egyptian pharaoh Khufu. It was ranked as the tallest structure on Earth for more than 43 centuries. Area covered by Great Pyramid can accommodate St. Peter's in Rome and the cathedrals of Florence and Milan. The Hanging Garden of Babylon are thought to have been built in the ancient city of Babylon. Although there are no proof that the garden actually existed, but it is considered to be as one of the 7 wonders of the world. It is called the Hanging Garden because the garden was built on high above the ground on multi-level stone terrace. The plants were not rooted on the earth like other traditional garden. If this garden actually existed, it was likely to be the most beautiful man-made garden ever created. Facts about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Hanging Gardens are the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world that may not even have existed. There is no documentation in Babylonian sources that the gardens is ever existed. There is also no solid archaeological evidence that they existed. If the gardens actually existed, it would have taken around 8,200 gallons of water each day to keep the plants watered. Some historians and archaeologists believe that the gardens did exist and were destroyed by war and erosion. Some believe it was earthquakes that eventually devastated and destroyed the gardens. In the hanging gardens, the plant did not actually hang. They grew from many different levels of terraces, similar to balconies. The third one is the Temple of Artemis. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus was built to honor Artemis, one of three maiden goddesses of Olympus. It was built in Ephesus, in an ancient city which today would be near Turkey. It had to be rebuilt at least 3 times due to fire, flood, and a mob that was determined to destroy it. Each time it was rebuilt, it became larger and even more beautiful and impressive. Fact about Temple of Artemis. Artemis was an Olympian god, the daughter of Zeus and Leto. She was the goddess of the moon and the goddess of the hunt. She was also the twin sister of Apollo. The first temple was built in approximately 800 years before Common Era. The first temple was destroyed in the 7th century. Reconstruction began in 550 before Common. It took about 10 years to rebuild it. Some historians say it was destroyed due to a flood. Others believe it was due to war. The second temple was approximately 4 times larger in area than the previous one. Each time the temple was rebuilt, it was on the same site. This temple may have been first one ever constructed of marble. It may also be the first building in history ever constructed of marble. The temple was used at different times as a house of worship and as a marketplace. The third time temple was built was 450 feet long multiplied by 225 feet wide. It was 60 feet high and had at least 127 columns. The third temple lasted for about 600 years. When it was destroyed by the Goths in 268, it was never rebuilt. One of the reasons it was not rebuilt because the cost of construction would have been too high. The site where the temple once stood is now a swamp. The statue of Zeus at Olympia was created by a sculptor named Phidias. It took him 12 years, from years 430 to 422 before Common Era, to complete the statue. Zeus was considered as the king of the Greek gods, and this magnificent statue was created to honor him. It was placed at the Temple of Olympia, a shrine to Zeus where Olympic Games took place in every 4 years. Facts about statue of Zeus at Olympia. The Olympic Games were held every 4 years in honor of Zeus. Zeus was considered to be the father of gods and men. He was the king of all other gods. The statue of Zeus at Olympia was about 42 feet tall. The statue was made of a wooden frame and covered in ivory and gold panels. The sculptor Phidias had previously created similar-sized statue of the goddess Athena. The sculpture of Athena was made for the Parthenon in Athens. The statue of Zeus at Olympia was destroyed by fire in the 5th century. The frame of the statue was made of wood. The statue required special care because the Olympia was very damp place and humidity could damage the statue. Olive oil was applied to the statue regularly to keep the wood from deteriorating. A visitor to the statue of Zeus in year 97, Chrysostomus described the statue as being made of gold, ebony, ivory, and precious stones. He also said that there were images of animals such as half lion and half man sphinx and Greek gods carved into the chair. In Zeus' right hand was figure of the goddess Victory of night. In his left hand he held a scepter topped with an eagle. The fifth list was Mausoleum at Halicarnassus. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus was built by Artemisia after her husband Mausolus died. Mausolus and Artemisia had ruled over Halicarnassus and the region surrounding it for 24 years. When Mausolus died in 353 before Common Era, Artemisia was reported to have been so broken-hearted, and then she hired the most talented artist to create the most magnificent tomb in the world. The finished tomb was 147 feet tall and sat on a hill overlooking Halicarnassus. Facts about the mausoleum. The city of Halicarnassus, where Mausolus and Artemisia ruled, is now known as the Bodrum, Turkey. The word mausoleum originates from the name Mausolus. The term mausoleum became the name used for tombs built above ground from that time. At the top of the tomb, there was sculpture created by the Phaetos. The carving depicted Mausolus and Artemisia in a chariot being pulled by 4 massive horses. Most of the mausoleum was made of marble. It was surrounded by a courtyard. A staircase was built leading up the platform where the mausoleum stood. There were stone lions flanking the staircase. In the 13th century, earthquakes toppled the columns of the mausoleum and the stone chariot was destroyed. By year 1401, all that was left was the base of the tomb. The Antipater of Sidon, who was in charge of listing the 7 wonders of the ancient world, chose to include the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. His reason was that he considered it to be an aesthetic triumph. The Colossus of Rhodes, as it is called, happened to be as one of the 3,000 statues that were found on the Rhodes Island. The Colossus of Rhodes was a 3rd century statue located in the island of Rhodes. The structure was built to honor Helios, a Greek titan. The 98.4 feet tall statue was erected to mark the victory of Rhodes over Cyprus. In ancient times, the structure was one of the tallest building. The Rhodians believed that the statue angered the titan Helios and he caused it to be destroyed by an earthquake. When the Arabs visited Rhodes Island in the 8th century, they dismantled the statue into scraps, and the scraps were carried out from the island by 900 camels. Facts about the Colossus of Rhodes. In terms of construction time, the Colossus of Rhodes took a total of 12 years to build from the start to finish. The statue was so enormous that in ancient times, people who visited its ruins were amazed that their full embrace could not go round to the thumb of the statue. Fundraising. After the ruler of Cyprus, Antigonus, was defeated by the Rhodians rallied around themselves to pull resources together for the construction of the gargantuan structure. The money was raised by sales made from selling the battle equipment left by the defeated Cyprian army. Framework. The spectacular statue was made entirely of iron and stone. The exterior of the image was made from bronze and iron. The interior was made from carved and well-sculptured stone. Aftermath of earthquake. After an earthquake destroyed the Colossus of Rhodes few years after it was erected, it was left untouched and without repairs for almost 8 centuries because the Oracle of Delphi had warned the Rhodians that they would incur the wrath of Helios if they tried to renovate it. It has unique structure. Some historians are of the school of thought are of the belief that the statue had both feet on either side of the harbor. A few others refuted this claim and stated that he stood in a traditional Greek pose. This theory has been weighed and found to be feasible because if the Titan's leg straddled the harbor would have been shut down for at least 12 years during construction of the entire structures. The link with the Statue of Liberty. The magnificent Statue of Liberty, which is presently in the United States of America, is usually called the modern Colossus. This is because they measure almost the same height. At the pedestal of the Statue of Liberty lies a plaque which has inscription of poem titled "The New Colossus." The new Colossus of Rhodes and the Statue of Liberty were erected on harbors. Also, the two statues were built to signify freedom. The last one for the 7 wonders of ancient world was the Pharos of Alexandria. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was the first lighthouse in the world. The construction began in 290 before Common Era and took 20 years to complete. When it was done, it was the tallest building in the world at the time, except for the Great Pyramid. It was built on the island of Pharos to help guide trade ships into its busy harbor at Alexandria, Egypt. The lighthouse was damaged by several earthquakes and eventually became an abandoned ruin. In 1994, some of the remains of the lighthouse were discovered by French archaeologists in Alexandria's eastern harbor. Facts about the Pharos of Alexandria. The lighthouse at Alexandria is also known as the Pharos of Alexandria. The city Alexandria was named by Alexander the Great. It was one of the 17 cities that he named after himself, but Alexandria was one of the few to survive. It is still a prosperous city today. In today's money, it would have cost about $3 million to build. The lowest level of the lighthouse was 100 feet square and 240 feet high. The second level had 8 sides and was about 115 feet tall. The third level was 60 foot high cylinder that had an opening at the top to allow a space where the fire burned to light the way for sailors in the night. On top of this was a statue in honor of Poseidon, the god of the sea. The lighthouse at Alexandria was approximately 450 feet tall. It was damaged by 3 earthquakes. After the last earthquakes, it was abandoned and fell to ruins. Today, the city of Alexandria uses the symbol of lighthouse on the flag of Alexandria Governorate as well as on their seal. It also appears on the seal of Alexandria University. Tell about the wonders of ancient world, so let's move to the wonders of modern world. These wonders of modern world list was announced in 7th July of 2007. On the top of the list was the Great Wall of China. Second one, ruins of Petra in Jordan. Number 3, the statue of Christ Redeemer in Brazil. And number 4, Peru's Machu Picchu, located at Peru. And number 5, the Chichen Itza pyramid, located in Mexico. Number 6 was the Colosseum in Rome, Italy. And the last one would be the Taj Mahal, which is located in India. This list 7 wonders were announced by New 7 Wonders Foundation in Switzerland. On the top of the list, 7 wonders of modern world was Taj Mahal, India. The Taj Mahal is an ivory white marble mausoleum on the south bank of the Yamuna River in the Indian city of Agra. It was commissioned in 1632 by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. His reign is from 1628 to 1658 to house the tomb of his favorite wife Mumtaz Mahal. It is also houses the tomb of Shah Jahan himself. Facts about Taj Mahal. The Taj Mahal was built by a whopping 22,000 laborers, painters, stonecutters, embroidery artists. Legend has it that Emperor Shah Jahan intended to build another Taj Mahal in black marble across the river, but a war with his sons interrupted these plans. The changing moods of Emperor's wife are well captured by the changing hues of the mausoleum at different times of the day. It takes a pinkish hue in the morning, milky white in the evening, and golden at night when illuminated by moonlight. Its intricate work of art and architectural genius took 17 years to complete. The most recognizable feature is the white dome at the peak of the mausoleum. It is often called the Onion Dome. It rises about 35 meters, around 115 feet, and is surrounded by 4 other domes. Taj Mahal is a famous Indian landmark and tourist magnet, attracting more than 1 million tourists every year. As always, rumor mills are on the override about this mausoleum. It is rumored that the emperor ordered that all the workers who worked on the mausoleum get their hands chopped so that no one could make anything like it ever again. If it was built today, Taj Mahal would cost emperor about $100,000 to make it as beautiful as it is. The material that were used to build Taj Mahal were transported to the construction site by a whopping 1,000 elephants. Many of the precious stones on the mausoleum were ripped off from the wall of the mausoleum by the British Army during the Indian Rebellion in year 1857. The Colosseum or Coliseum, that is also known as the Flavian Amphitheatre, is an oval amphitheatre in the center of the city of Rome, Italy. The Colosseum is the main symbol of Rome, as this building is an imposing construction with almost 2,000 years of history. Experience visit here will bring us back in time to discover the way of life. Facts about Colosseum, Rome, Italy. It is built between 72 Anno Domini and 80 Anno Domini. The Colosseum consists of stone and concrete. It was constructed by tens of thousands of Jewish slaves under the rule of the Emperor Vespasian. It is measuring 189 meters long, 156 meters wide, and 50 meters in height. The Colosseum is the largest amphitheater in the world. The Colosseum could seat around 50,000 spectators for a variety of events. This included gladiator contests, animal hunts, and reenactment of famous battles. There are even mock sea battles as they flooded the Colosseum with water. The arena had 36 trapdoors for special effects, as well as many underground passages and rooms to hold wild animals and gladiators before the games began. In order to gain popularity, emperors organized and paid for the events in the Colosseum themselves. Entry was free for all ancient Romans, and they sometimes had free food throughout the spectacles too. The Colosseum had a hilarium, a type of awning used in Roman times. This pulled over the top of the seating area to shade the spectators and protect them from the scorching sun. The animals bought to fight in the arena came from all over the Roman Empire. They included big cats such as lions and tigers, as well as rhinos, crocodiles, and bears. Some of the games in the Colosseum lasted up to 100 days. However, the gladiator contest stopped in 435 Anno Domini, and the last animal hunts were in 532 Common Era. And this was partly due to the cost of acquiring animals and gladiators alongside maintaining the arena. It is estimated that over 400,000 people and over 1 million wild animals died during the centuries that the games took place. Natural disasters and vandalism destroyed approximately 2/3 of the Colosseum, but it was the 847 Anno Domini and 1231 Anno Domini earthquakes that did the most damage that you can see today. Next is Chichen Itza Pyramid, Mexico. Chichen Itza was a large pre-Columbian city built by the Maya people of the Terminal Classic period. The archaeological site is located in Tina Municipality, Yucatan State, Mexico. Facts about Chichen Itza. The term Chichen Itza means the mouth at the well of Iza. It is believed Iza means water magicians, deriving from the Mayan is for magic and for water. El Castillo, which is the temple of Kukulkan, is the famous pyramid which dominates the site of Chichen Itza, and it actually sits on another much older temple. It is believed that by archaeologists to have been a powerful economy city around 600 Anno Domini. The fall of Chichen Itza is thought to have been approximately 1000 Anno Domini. The design and layout of Chichen Itza was clearly well planned, and builders constructed temples and pyramids in sets of clusters. The four most well-known clusters are the Great Node Platform, the Osario Group, the Central Group, and the Old Chichen, which is not open to the public. The Great Node Platform is home to the most visited cities of Chichen Itza, including the Kukulkan Pyramid, the Great Ball Court, and the Temple of the Jaguars. During the spring on 20th of March and autumn equinox 22nd September, sun rays created a shadow across the Kukulkan Pyramid that gives the appearance of serpents slithering down the staircase. It is located at the north side of the Kukulkan Pyramid. It's a platform dedicated to the planet Venus. The Mayans were devoted astronomers, and the movements of Venus held special meaning to them, with it influencing the architecture of the ancient Mayan city Uxmal. Although the Kukulkan Pyramid is the most famous and most visited, there are numerous others in Chichen Itza. The Rosaria is very similar but smaller in size, and at the center is an opening to a natural cave. Many of the cities in Chichen Itza are known for their unusual sounds. If you clap once from one end of the ball court, it produces 9 echoes in the middle of the court. Additionally, a clap in front of the Kukulkan Pyramid creates an echo resembling the serpent chip. Machu Picchu is tangible evidence of the urban Inca Empire at the peak of its power and achievement. It is a citadel of cut stone fit together without mortar so tightly that it cracks still can't be penetrated by a knife blade. The complex of palaces and plazas, temples, and homes may have been built as a ceremonial site, a military stronghold, or a retreat for ruling elites. Its dramatic location is certainly well suited for any of those purposes. The ruins lie on a high ridge, surrounded on three sides by the windy, turbulent Urubamba River for some 2,000 feet. Around 610 meters below. Facts about Peru's Machu Picchu. In the Quechua Indian language, Machu Picchu means old peak or old mountain. Machu Picchu is made up of more than 150 buildings ranging from baths and houses to temples and sanctuaries. The compound contains more than 100 separate flights of stairs. Most of the individual staircases were carved from one slab of stone. Although many of the stones that were used to build the city were more than 50 pounds, it is believed that no wheels were used to transport these rocks up the mountain. Rather, it is thought that the hundreds of men pushed the heavy rocks up the steep mountainside. Many different theories exist about Machu Picchu's purpose. One of it was a royal estate and a secret ceremonial center among them. The Incas were some of the best masons in the world. The structures were so well built with a technique called ashlar. The stones that are cut to fit together without mortar, that not even a knife blade can fit in between the stones. Machu Picchu was only known locally until Yale professor Hiram Bingham rediscovered the site in 1911. His book, The Lost City of the Incas, was based on his findings. A long-standing dispute between Peru and Yale University has existed over the artifacts collected by Bingham during his exploration of the site. Yale maintains that they own the items, while Peru insists they were given on loan. Machu Picchu was an astronomical observatory, and its sacred Intihuatana stone accurately indicates two equinoxes. Twice a year, the sun sits directly over the stone, creating no shadow. Unfortunately, most cities built by the Inca civilization were destroyed by the Spanish conquest. Machu Picchu was in a hidden location, invisible from below and not found, making it one of the most well-preserved Inca cities and archaeological gem. On the fifth of the list was Statue Christ the Redeemer, Brazil. Statue Christ Redeemer, Brazil is an Art Deco statue of Jesus Christ in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, created by French sculptor Paul Landowski and built by Brazilian engineer Heitor da Silva Costa in collaboration with French engineer Albert Caquot. Romanian sculptor George Leonida fashioned the face. It is constructed between 1922 and 1931. The statue is 30 meters, which is 98 feet high, excluding its 8 meters, 26 feet pedestal. The arm stretch 28 meters, around 92 feet wide. The statue weighs 635 metric tons, which is 625 long, 700 short tons, and it is located at the peak of the 7 meter, 2,300 feet. Facts about Statue of Christ Redeemer, Brazil. Christ the Redeemer was built using reinforced concrete and has an outer shell of 6 million soapstone tiles. It is believed that the workers who made these tiles occasionally wrote notes on the back, meaning this iconic landmark is full of hidden messages. Due to the statue's mountaintop position, it is prone to lightning strikes and gets hit around 3 to 6 times a year. Prior to the FIFA World Cup 2014, lightning struck and broke one of the statue's thumbs. The original design of the statue was different from what we see today. It was intended for Christ to be holding a globe in one hand and a cross in the other, rather than to open arms. Christ the Redeemer was not actually built in Brazil. It was first made in France by French sculptor Paul Landowski, who created the statue in clay pieces. These were then shipped to Brazil to be remade with reinforced concrete by a Brazilian engineer, Heito da Silva Costa, and French engineer Albert Caquot. The construction of the statue took 9 years, beginning in 1922 and finally finished in 1931 at cost $250,000 US. It is one of the largest statues of Jesus and the tallest Art Deco statue in the world. Christ the Redeemer reaches a height of 30 meters and boasts an arm span of 28 meters. The light-colored stone used to build the statue was taken from a quarry near the city of Ouro Preto. However, the stone is in short supply and restoration works are having to be done using different types. As a result, stones in a darker shade is slowly replacing the original, meaning Christ the Redeemer is gradually getting darker. The ruins of Petra, Jordan is also called as Al-Batra in Arabic. Petra is a historical and archaeological city located in southern Jordanian governorate of Ma'ab. The city has managed to wow the world with its stone-cut architecture as well as water conduit system. The city is also referred to as the Rose City due to the color of stone out of which it is carved. So here are the facts about the ruins of Petra, Jordan. Among the Petra's amazing architecture, the treasury is the most popular. It is estimated to be over 2,000 years. The Bedouin of the Arabian desert have destroyed some of the most priceless carvings on the treasury's wall. They used the carvings as target during their shooting practice. The structures on most of the Petra archaeological site have been weakened by the salt that is blown from the Dead Sea, which crystallizes on the building's column. Petra is thought to have been built during the Byzantine era of the 5th and the 6th Anno-Domini, when Petra became an important Christian center. Petra is the home to over 800 carved tombs. Petra is more popular for its 800 individual monuments that includes buildings, tombs, baths, funerary halls, temples, arch gateways, and colonnaded streets that were mostly carved from the kaleidoscope sandstone. The city was first established in 312 before Common, making it one of the oldest metropolises in the world. It is in Petra that King Aretas called for the arrest of the Babylonian Apostle Paul after he was converted into Christianity. Among the most popular monuments in Petra is the 2,100-pound sandstone bust of Dushara, Petra's primary male deity. Petra is one of the evidence to mankind that Middle East was, after all, the most influential region of the world in the Middle Ages. So let's move to the last, which is the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China is one of the greatest sites in the world. The longest wall in the world is an awe-inspiring feat of ancient defensive architecture. It is winding path over rugged country and steep mountains takes in some great scenery. So here are the facts about the Great Wall of China. The construction of the Great Wall took over 2,000 years. The very first parts of the wall were built as early in the spring and autumn period between the 8th and 5th centuries before Common. These walls were constructed mostly with stamping earth and gravel between board frames to resist the attack of swords, spears, and other small arms. Several sections of these walls were ordered to be destructed by Qin Shi Huang after he unified China as Qin dynasty in 221 BC. And then the new walls were built to connect the retaining wall along the empire's northern frontier to defend the empire against northern invaders. Considering the difficulty of transporting a large quantity of materials, local resources were used as much as possible to construct the walls. So the walls on the mountain ranges were made by stones from the mountains, and the walls in the plains were made by rammed earth. The wall is accurately series of walls rather than one long continuous wall. Many people think that the Great Wall is one uninterrupted long structure. Meanwhile, in fact, it is a collection of different sections built by various dynasties along an east to west line across the northern border of ancient and imperial Chinese territories. A surprising material can be found in the wall. Most parts of the wall are built with stone, brick, tempered earth, wood, and other unremarkable materials. More interestingly, glutinous rice, which is the sticky rice flour, was used in the making of mortar or binding material to bind the bricks as early the Qin dynasty, because glutinous rice has good cohesive properties. The Great Wall is the longest structure ever built by humans in the world. It is hard to tell the exact length of the Great Wall ever built in ancient China. Experts thought that the wall was 5,500 miles long, but an archaeological survey done by China's State Administration of Cultural Heritage in 2012 shows that the Great Wall stretches 13,170 miles long. The Great Wall has been described as the longest cemetery on Earth. The human caused the wall construction is huge. It has been estimated by some authors that over 1 million people died building the wall during the Qin dynasty only. Human remains have been found under parts of the wall by archaeologists. As such, the wall has been described as the longest cemetery on Earth. Chinese convicts were involved in the Great Wall construction as punishment. Wall construction has been used as a common punishment for Chinese convicts since the Qin dynasty, as the work was very dangerous. According to some estimates, 400,000 workers lost their lives while building the Qin Wall. The last one, the Great Wall is not strong enough at warding off invaders. The Great Wall was built an important component of China's military defense system to keep out invading forces. Despite all the effort, its various enemies throughout history have passed across the world successfully. Okay, that's all from me. Some briefing about 7 wonders of ancient world and 7 wonders of modern world. Now let's take a look on the videos that I found regarding to this subtopic. I hope you guys enjoy the video.
Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic. Today we're beginning a 3-part series looking at the wonders of the world. We often hear the phrase that there are 7 wonders of the world, but these lists have changed throughout time. We're going to begin with the 7 wonders of the ancient world, followed next week by the 7 wonders of the Middle Ages, then leading to the 7 wonders of the modern era, which is a much more engineering and innovation focused list. But let's start at the beginning. This list was believed to be created around the 1st century as the first tourists began to really explore Greece and Egypt and the rest of the Mediterranean, so this list is geographically confined to that area. They also existed in a pretty wide range of time, with only 60 years that all 7 of them supposedly existed at the same time, if they all existed at all. We'll get to that later. Let's begin with the only one of these wonders to still exist today, the Great Pyramid of Giza. While there are a few pyramids in Egypt, the largest pyramid belongs to the pharaoh Khufu, and this pyramid was singled out as a sight to see. It was supposedly built around 2560 BC, surviving today for a momentous 4,000 year plus lifespan. For almost 3,800 of those years, it was the tallest man-made structure on Earth, until modern engineering allowed skyscrapers to exist. We're still unsure how this pyramid was built, and it's debated if slave labor was used or if skilled craftsmen were recruited. Either way, totaling an average workforce of 14,000 people at a time, over the course of 10 years. It's also debated if this pyramid was meant to be a tomb or not, as Khufu's remains were never found. Some believe an elaborate, undiscovered room in the pyramid may still hold his body, but only time and slow, meticulous investigation will tell. Our second wonder is also in Egypt, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. This lighthouse was created under the reign of Ptolemy I and Ptolemy II, taking about 12 years to build. This lighthouse had a giant furnace at the top, becoming the first of its kind and the model for all future lighthouses, used to guide ships into a harbor at night. It was destroyed over time by several earthquakes, which slowly caused the lighthouse to crumble into the sea. The fort was built over the lighthouse's ruins, so it wasn't able to be studied or examined until only recently, but most of the remains are still underwater. Our next wonder takes us away from Egypt and now to Greece, where we have the Colossus of Rhodes. The city of Rhodes is a harbor city, and the giant Colossus was built in honor of the Greek god Helios. They built the statue to celebrate victory for defending their city against an attack. The statue was said to be as tall as the Statue of Liberty, and the pose of the statue is hotly debated, with the current belief that it couldn't have actually straddled the opening of the harbor as it's shown in most pictures, but it likely stood to one side. Building the statue in the center of the harbor would have closed the actual harbor to traffic, and that seems unlikely, or so experts believe. It only stood for about 50 or 60 years before a massive earthquake caused it to snap at the knees and fall onto the city. For a long time, people still traveled to see its ruins, but eventually most of the bronze used to make it was melted down and sold, so there's no evidence left in Rhodes of the statue. We now move on to the statue of Zeus, which is located in the city of Olympia in Greece. This giant statue was made out of wood, but then covered in gold and precious metals. Zeus was the highest of the gods, so it was only fitting to build the statue in the largest temple to him. Eventually, the Roman emperors that took over control of the temple forbid worship of quote-unquote pagan gods, so the temple was abandoned and the statue crumbled. Earthquakes and fires helped to expedite this process. Some theories point to the statue being torn apart and taken to sell, since little to no evidence of the statue remains. Our last Greek site is the Temple of Artemis, located in an area called Ephesus, which now falls into the geography of modern-day Turkey. This temple was built to worship the goddess of the hunt, Artemis, and there's a theory that the Greek Amazons had a major role in building this temple to their patron goddess. This temple was destroyed and rebuilt many times by fires and floods and earthquakes. It was rediscovered and excavated in the mid-1800s. The site is now commemorated by a single column that's been built from discovered pieces from the wreckage. The next wonder is also in Turkey, the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. This wonder stems from the ruler named Mausolus, who wanted to build a city beautiful and intricate, so he transformed the city of Halicarnassus into a sight to behold. He died relatively young, though he had planned for this with an elaborate tomb and surrounding architecture. This tomb looked down over the city and included a stairway flanked by statues. At the time, it looked much more like a temple than a tomb. Tombs like this today, usually large rooms that hold a coffin, are called mausoleums after him. It was destroyed when Catholic knights took over the city and built Bodrum Castle, using the mausoleum's bricks to fortify it. Following this, the rest of the treasures and even the body of Mausolus and his wife went missing. You can visit this castle now and likely spot bricks and pieces that are from the old mausoleum. You can also see the spot where the mausoleum used to sit. Our last wonder is the only wonder that there is no physical evidence of. It may not have even existed at all. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The ancient city of Babylon existed in what is now called Iraq, and it's said to have featured a garden, with tiers upon tiers of hanging flowers that pour down into it. What we're seeing on the screen is either what they believe this garden looked like, or gardens that have been inspired by it. The leading theory as to who created these gardens leads to Nebuchadnezzar II, who likely built them for his wife. There is an opposing theory that these gardens never existed in Babylon, but instead were built by an Assyrian king in the city of Nineveh. There are many references in ancient texts that discuss this Assyrian garden that line up with what we imagine. Thank you for watching our first video on the 7 wonders of the world. Next week we've got part 2. If it's already been a week, you can check out part 2 right here. If it hasn't been a week, just be patient, subscribe, stay tuned here. And thanks for everything. Hopefully you enjoy next week's installment.
As a conclusion, all the seven wonders of the world that I mentioned before are the example of civil engineering, mechanical engineering, and chemical engineering branch. There are many engineering skills applied to build all these majestic building. Next, all the wonders building can be used for research purpose. For example, research about the Great Pyramid of Giza to know the history of ancient Egypt. By studying these pyramids, we can know the way of life, culture, and belief of the Egyptian. Artifacts and writings of this pyramid enable us to learn more about their civilization. They also serve as a tourist destination. Many people all around the world would come to Egypt in large numbers to see this great wonder. The third one, we need these wonders to help us know why they are built. For example, the Colossus of Rhodes. It was built to celebrate victory over war in their time. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus and the Taj Mahal is needed because it symbolizes love, because it shows how special love it is. These wonders are also needed to show people their heritage and culture. Culture and heritage reflects shape values, beliefs, and aspirations, thereby defining a people's national identity. It is important to preserve our cultural heritage because it keeps our integrity as a people. Lastly, we need all the seven wonders of the world to find out their significance and importance in this modern world. They could have been compared with the modern wonders to find out the difference and why they are referred as to be the ancient one.
Why engineering is important in the present day. For ages, engineering has turned imagination and fantasy into something that is tangible and useful. For instance, consider the invention of the wheel as one of the oldest examples of how engineering has transformed our lives. Since the dawn of the industrial, the importance and the influence of engineering has grown at a blazing speed. The modern world we live in wouldn't have been possible without the marvels of engineering, such as high-speed motors, cellular network, power grids, automated assembly lines, and many more. It wouldn't be too far-fetched to claim that without engineering, our society would have ossified in no time. Today, the application of engineering spans the spectrum from deep-sea exploration to space travel and beyond. In the modern era, it will be extremely difficult to find an avenue where engineering has left its footprints. From construction to aeronautical, medicine to environment, and even the chair you are sitting in, engineering is everywhere. So let's take a look at how engineering has contributed to various sectors. First of all, the construction. Without civil engineering, the Hoover Dam, the Burj Khalifa, or the Chestnut Bridge would have been a distant reality. Engineering has contributed immensely towards the development of infrastructure that is crucial to the sustenance of our civilization. Proper knowledge of civil engineering has not enabled us to build bridges, dams, tunnels, expressways, but also figure out a way to effectively handle traffic congestion, disasters, and other unfavorable circumstances. There are some buildings that engineers have been proud of because of our modern technologies, such as Burj Khalifa in Dubai, KLCC, Twin Tower in Kuala Lumpur, Garden of the Bays in Singapore, and etc. Civil engineering is poised to undergo major transition in 2018 thanks to the advancement in technology, which is the driving force.
On its completion in 1936, this was the largest concrete structure ever built. The incredible feat of engineering played a critical role in the development of the American Southwest during the early 20th century, providing flood management, hydroelectric power, and securing a reliable source of water for millions. This is how the Hoover Dam was built. With plans around since 1900 to harness the power of the mighty Colorado River, it wasn't until 1928 that the United States Congress authorized the project and initial surveying began. With the onset of the Great Depression just a year later, the project was seen as a way for the government to provide much-needed jobs in the American Southwest, which had been experiencing a population boom prior to the stock market crash. Located 26 miles southwest of Las Vegas, on the Nevada-Arizona border, the project required a vast number of workers and their families to relocate, and an entire new town was established. Owned and run by the government, Boulder City was to be a model for the rest of the country to follow in the dark times of the Depression. To drive the project's progress, President Hoover ordered construction of the dam to start in May 1931, before the necessary infrastructure at Boulder City was in place, and many workers lived in temporary tents in what became dubbed Ragtown. To escape the harsh living conditions, many workers began to frequent the then small outpost of Las Vegas, driving significant growth and earning it a reputation for gambling and adult entertainment. Though living conditions were poor, work began on diverting the Colorado River so that the dam could be constructed on the dry riverbed. To divert the water flow, 4 56-foot, 17-metre wide diversion tunnels, 2 on each side of the river, were bored through the canyon using nothing more than dynamite, followed by workers using pneumatic jackhammers. Excavated rock was then dumped into the Colorado River, creating a cofferdam that forced water to flow through the newly constructed tunnels. A second cofferdam downstream prevented water flowing back into the construction site and formed an area that could be pumped dry, exposing the riverbed. The Hoover Dam employs a gravity arch design and is held in place by the weight of its concrete, together with the pressure of the water it holds, forcing it into the canyon floor and walls. Such a principle required the canyon surfaces to be smoothed as one of the first activities, to prevent leaks. It was during this phase of the project that the first hard hats began to be used. Workers dipped their hats in tar and let it harden, protecting them, at least to some extent, from falling debris. Seeing their success, the project's leaders quickly ordered thousands of these hats and mandated their use by the workers. In 1933, some 18 months ahead of schedule, the first concrete pours began on the dam. As concrete gives off heat and contracts as it cures, a project on the scale of the Hoover Dam would have taken more than 125 years to harden if poured in a single continuous pour, and structural weaknesses would have caused the dam to crack under its own weight. Instead, the site was divided into a series of rectangular moulds, some as large as 50 square feet or 15 square metres in size. These moulds were fitted with a series of steel pipes that carried river water through them, allowing the concrete to cool and harden much faster than if it was left to do so alone in the heat of the desert. Once the concrete had hardened and stopped contracting, the pipes and hairline cracks between neighbouring blocks were filled in with grout, and a new layer of moulds was placed on top. This process was repeated time and again to build the dam walls. As the dam steadily rose, getting the concrete to where it had to go before it began to harden started to pose a significant challenge. To overcome this, an ingenious system of overhead cables that carried buckets of concrete from specially built concrete plants on the Nevada side of the dam to the required location on the construction site was used. In total, 87.5 million cubic feet of concrete and some 582 miles of cooling pipes were used in the construction of the dam. By 1935, 2 years ahead of schedule, the 726-foot-high dam was complete, and the river diversion tunnels were sealed shut, allowing the Colorado to begin flooding the canyon behind the structure and creating the reservoir we know today as Lake Mead. Fit-out of the adjacent power plant and its associated infrastructure took place in parallel with construction of the main structure, and the dam began generating electricity at the end of 1936. Today, this remarkable infrastructure project has an average output of 4.2 billion kilowatt hours and provides water and electricity to millions across the southwestern United States, an economic catalyst to an entire region of North America and a powerful example of the impact that our industry can have. If you enjoyed this video and would like to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, subscribe to the B1M.
Secondly, medicine. When we talk about the progress in medical science, the image of biologists or a highly qualified doctors comes to our mind. But you will be surprised to know that engineering and medical sciences goes hand in hand with each other, and to improve the quality of the healthcare. From MRI machines to X-rays, engineering has contributed more to medical science than we can fathom. Nowadays, there are treatments to cure cancer patients, such as surgery with radiation therapy and chemotherapy. These technologies have been invested in modern times. During ancient times, when people are suffering with cancer or any disease or any endangered disease, they are eating the herbs that were found around them. Hospitals need to be prepared for anything that might come through the doors. That's why keeping key pieces of medical equipment on hand at all times are so crucial to providing complete care. In order to provide comprehensive treatment for patients, there is a standard set of equipment that all hospitals should have ready. Defibrillators, patient monitors, surgical tables, EKGs, anesthesia machines, sterilizers, lights, ultrasound and electrosurgical units, blankets, warmers are all necessary pieces hospital equipment. Keeping these on hand are critical to the operational success of a hospital and the healthcare provided within it. Number 3 is energy. Have you ever wondered about the technology that powers small household appliances to humongous machines in factories? Of course, it's the electric current that is conducted by high tension wires from power stations. But how are the grids designed? Or how do you ensure that high voltage currents doesn't damage your gadgets? Well, we have electric engineers to thank for that. Number 4, environment. The development and deployment of systems that provide drinking water that is safe for human consumption is one of the major contributions of environmental engineering. Moreover, we also need a mechanism that can reduce pollution and clean up contaminated water bodies, land, and sustain our crops and livestock. Thankfully, the pioneers in environmental engineering are tackling these issues by coming up with new and innovative solutions to minimize pollution, making our industrial process environment friendly. Apart from these areas, engineering has a wide range of applications such as in automotive, food processing, manufacturing, electronics, avionics, biotechnology, and software industries. Number 5 is communication. How did people communicate in the time before modern technology was developed? Traditional communication is a practice that's followed since ancient times. Conventional methods of communication involve in face-to-face communication, radio, television, sending messages over postcard and envelopes. You could recall having seen a performance stage show. This followed the method of mass communication in which people do take away messages by letters carried one way or another, including carrier pigeon. Carrier pigeons have been used to transfer physical messages from place to place. Urgent matters mostly went by people riding horses, and some empires had very efficient systems. The Mongols were one. Smoking signals and beacons were also used to inform their comrades of a forthcoming attack. The system you see used in Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, is entirely feasible and things like it did exist. Today, modern technology dominates our communication. We have a massive range of ways in which we can stay connected, but each channel of communication can influence our relationships in a different way. Social media has been around since the early days of the internet, and it still dominates most of our lives. The long list of social networks continues to grow, and each one is continuing to drive millions of users to their site every day, which is why it is one of the most popular forms of communication. Social media may be all about brand awareness, but it is also a great channel for communication as it enables you to post open messages for everyone to see, as well as to engage with users through comments. Voice calling is even more personalized than the channels previously mentioned. The telephone or mobile phone instantly allows both parties to hear the tones and emotions of the other caller and is one of the most commonly used communication tools. How engineering is solving complex problems. The basic tenet of engineering has always been solving complex issues and making our lives simple, safe, happy, and productive. If we look through the pages of history, we can see how engineering has solved complex problems. Be it transportation, manufacturing, or even winning wars, engineering has always played a pivotal role in our ventures. Even today, engineering is helping us create devices, machines, and software that can solve some of our most complex problems. Even today, engineering is helping us create devices, machines, and software that can solve some of our most complex problems. For example, robotics and embedded engineers have already developed robots that can detect and disarm explosive charges. Robots have already been developed to help in the case of fires and disasters to evacuate trapped victims. The systems are being put through rigorous testing and undergoing continuous improvement before they can be deployed on a large scale. Climate change is a looming disaster. It could be quite disastrous for the human race if left unchecked. Fortunately, engineers and scientists are working together to develop green technologies, low-cost nuclear reactors, and means to harness solar power. These innovations will focus on curbing the amount of pollution humans spill into our ecosystem. How engineering education have evolved over the years. As engineering has evolved over the years, engineering education has also become more specialized. These days, colleges from our college offer multiple streams of engineering such as electrical, electronic, mechanical, automotive, aeronautic, telecommunication, chemical, biotechnology, and etc. Mechanical engineering is considered to be an evergreen branch because almost every industry requires engineering graduates from the mechanical specialty. As engineers has evolved over the years, engineering education has also become more specialized. These days, colleges offer multiple streams of engineering such as electronics, electrical, mechanical, automotive, aeronautic, telecommunication, chemical, biotechnology, and etc. Mechanical engineering is considered to be an evergreen branch because almost every industry requires engineering graduates from the mechanical specialty. Other than that, the future is looking increasingly bright for software, IT, and telecommunications engineering graduates, as these fields are closely related to the internet and networking. That being said, engineering is all about problem solving and transforming dreams into reality. So, as long as our desire to build new things doesn't come to a halt, the importance of engineering will keep soaring high. Engineering can be a rewarding and well-paying job, while many people would consider factory work, construction, law enforcement, and firefighting as dangerous professions. Few will include engineering in this category. Yet, many engineers face hazards that could result in their serious injury or death while in their office, on work sites, traveling between their office and job sites, and conducting their research and design duties. Like workers injured in other industries, engineers may be entitled to workers' compensation benefits under New Jersey's Workers' Compensation Law while they are off work healing from the injuries. There are many types of engineers who work in a wide variety of industries, each with its own set of occupational hazards. From jobs where engineers face dangers include chemical engineers spend much of the time in labs where they are exposed to toxic, flammable, and other hazardous chemicals and materials. While automotive spend some time at the office, they also must travel to perform facilities and factories where they are around heavy machinery and behind the wheel of vehicles they are working on. Construction engineers must spend time on the construction site and face many of the same dangers as construction workers, such as falling from heights, being struck by heavy objects, or being caught in machinery. In addition, they must travel between their office and these construction sites. Electrical engineers work with electricity and must travel to high-risk, high-voltage work sites that are often near busy roads or in more isolated natural settings. Mining engineers are responsible for ensuring that the mine is built safely and must solve complex engineering problems that arise on the job site. This can require them to spend time in underground the mine, where they face similar dangers of injury or death as miners do. Aerospace engineers. These engineers work with large dangerous pieces of machinery when they build and maintain airplanes. Engineers face many potentially dangerous situations while doing their job, where they risk being injured or killed. Some of the incidents that can cause them to file workers' compensation claims include car accidents. Many engineers must spend some time on the road traveling between their office and other job sites like construction sites and factories to conducting testing and handle problems. This increases their risk of being injured or killed in a car accident caused by a negligent driver while in transit or at their destination. Number 2, falls from heights. Engineers working at construction sites, in factories, and while resolving electrical issues often must work from heights. They can suffer catastrophic injuries like traumatic brain injury, spinal and back injuries, paralysis, and death if they fall, even more likely if they are not provided with fall protection. Number 3, slip and fall accident. Slip and fall accidents can happen at the office or off-site for a multitude of reasons, like when parking lots are not maintained, flooring is cracked, ripped or torn, and spills and debris are not cleaned up. Chemical engineers and other engineers who work with chemical and other hazardous substances can suffer chemical burns, respiratory illness, and other injuries as a result of exposure to these dangerous materials. Long-term exposure to these toxic substances could result in the development of an occupational illness, such as cancer or a respiratory illness, fires and explosion, toxic flammables, chemicals and materials found in the chemistry lab, manufacturing plants, and construction sites can explode or cause a fire, endangering engineers and other workers. Fallen equipment. When engineers work around heavy equipment, tools, or materials, they are in danger of being hit by heavy objects, especially dangerous if they are also working from a height. Engineers working with or around electricity can suffer electrical shocks, electrocution, and electrical burns if an accident can happen. Repetitive motion injuries. Many engineers spend long hours working in offices at the computers and can suffer repetitive motion injuries such as carpal tunnel syndrome, tennis elbow, and shoulder, back, and spine injuries. Becoming an engineer is one of the most rewarding, if stressful, career choices a person can make. While it will be a harsh and long road, most qualified engineers have never look back. There are a few other careers someone can choose that can match engineering for being both intellectually challenging and rewarding at the same time. It won't be a walk in the park by no stretch of the imagination, but as Theodore Roosevelt once said, nothing worth having comes easy. It is not a secret that engineering stands quite high on the list of best paid degrees. Let's see which types of engineering are worth studying if you want to afford luxury things in the future. Have in mind that all the data is based on the US Data and Statistics Bureau. Architectural engineers make sure a building will not take any structural, environmental damage or collapse in a few years, and work on lighting, heating, air conditioning, and plumbing. Dividing the time between working with CAD software in the office and construction sites, they need good communication skills in order to work well in teams. Although personal requirements are quite low in comparison to other engineering professions, we can still have a really nice career.
To me, architectural engineering is whole building design. It's looking at how buildings work, how they function, not just how they stand up, but what goes into them in the first place to make them work properly.
Architectural engineering is a discipline that brings together elements from architecture, structural engineering and mechanical and electrical engineering. Even though it has this broad range of elements, it brings these together in a focused and targeted way towards sustainable design.
I chose architectural engineering because I knew that I was interested in buildings and how they worked and how they were put together, but not 100% sure of the exact route I wanted to take. So with such a broad range of education and subjects covered, I thought that I would be able to get into the career that I'd want in the end.
My day-to-day job involves working in the Bridges team in the infrastructure department. So this involves assessments, designs from first principles and all the way up to inspections, so I get to go out and actually inspect existing structures as well.
I model buildings on the computer, so trying to predict how they'll perform in real life when they're actually in the ground. This ranges from predicting how much energy they might use, the carbon they might emit, or how comfortable the people might be inside them.
We work on conceptual design to detail design. As an example, we worked on a building in Kathmandu where we took the lead with the architect to inform the form and shape of the building to promote natural ventilation and decrease heat gains.
The architectural engineering course is really useful. It's got a joint accreditation, so even from undergraduate studies you're used to working in a multidisciplinary team, which all building projects in the real world are.
Well, I think the course is perfectly suited for working in the building industry. Changes in the regulation means there's new supervisory roles that need to be thought of from concept stage all the way up to handover, and I think this course is best suited for that.
Architectural engineering teaches us to look at building design in a holistic way, which is really the only true way that you can design in a sustainable way.
A career in architectural engineering creates a massive opportunity. It's estimated by 2030 some 70% of people will be living in cities, and that's going to be around 4 billion people. So the challenges that this presents in terms of energy, carbon, water, mobility and of course the design of the cities themselves is immense. For graduates trained in architecture and engineering with a multidisciplinary understanding, they've got the opportunity to come in and address some of these issues. Here at Arup, we work across all of these sectors, and our teams have lots of graduates from the University of Sheffield course. People have worked on schools in Africa, the London Olympics, and of course the Diamond here in Sheffield. Architectural engineers are in demand the world over, and so many of our graduates have travelled and worked overseas too. It's hard to think of a more rewarding career in terms of the positive impact that you can make and the kind of experiences that you can gain.
Another subspecialty of engineering is focusing on solving medical and biologist issues. Biomedical engineers can choose a preferred place to work at among hospitals, engineering firms, or medical supply companies. Civil engineering graduates are in high demand these days. Every big city needs roads, bridges, as well as various transportation facilities, and this is where civil engineers get the most employment. Learning how to build all sorts of different buildings and infrastructure, they can also protect the environment by designing and implementing environmental friendly projects. The civil engineer's salary can be quite high depending on project and education. The work and salary of a mechanical engineer may vary at times and can include anything from small solutions to the development of large plants and vehicles. Mechanical engineers are needed in most industries and can be involved in all aspects and research development to manufacturing, management, and production. Working with electrical devices and components is obviously a part of the job electrical engineers. Despite what you might think, it is an exciting and cutting-edge career. Everyone needs to keep up with the latest technological advancement. Experienced professionals working in the United States can get quite a nice compensation based on the level of technical knowledge and experience in the field.
Engineering that generally deals with the study and application of electricity, electronics, and electromagnetism. Electrical engineering has now subdivided into a wide range of subfields, including electronics, digital computers, power engineering, telecommunications, control systems, radio frequency engineering, signal processing, instrumentation, and microelectronics. Many of these subdisciplines overlap and also overlap with other engineering branches, spanning a huge number of specializations such as hardware engineering, power electronics, electromagnetics and waves, microwave engineering, nanotechnology, electrochemistry, renewable energies, mechatronics, electrical material science, and more. Electrical engineering is one of the newer branches of engineering, date back to the late 19th century. Early experiments with electricity included primitive batteries and static charges. However, the actual design, construction, and manufacturing of useful devices and systems began with the implementation of Michael Faraday's law of induction, which essentially states that the voltage in a circuit is proportional to the rate of change in the magnetic field through the circuit. This law applies to the basic principles of the electric generator, the electric motor, and the transformer. The advent of the modern age is marked by the introduction of electricity to homes, businesses, and industry, all of which were made possible by electrical engineers. What do electrical engineers do? Electrical engineers work in a very wide range of industries, and the skills required are likewise variable. They apply the physics and mathematics of electricity, electronics, and electromagnetism to both large and small scale systems to process information and transmit energy. To do this, electrical engineers design computers, electronic devices, communication systems, test equipment, electric power networks, and improve systems through problem-solving techniques. The tools and equipment that an individual engineer may need are similarly variable, ranging from a simple voltmeter to a top-end analyzer to sophisticated design and manufacturing software. The job duties of electrical engineers depend on the industry they are in, but could include carrying out feasibility studies for new technical developments, drawing up project plans and circuit diagrams using computer-assisted engineering and design software, estimating costs and project timings, coordinating the work of technicians and craftspeople, testing installations and systems and analyzing test data, making sure projects meet safety regulations, overseeing inspection and maintenance programs, attending meetings, writing reports, and giving presentations. They usually work on projects with other professionals like civil engineers, architects, and engineering technicians. Skills required in electrical engineering. 1. Circuit designing. 2. Instrumentation and electrical measurements. 3. Power transmission and transmission lines fundamentals. 4. Electrical drives and electrical machinery. 5. Power electronics. 6. Renewable energy fundamentals. 7. Microcontrollers and programming languages. 8. Presentation and communication skills. 9. Fundamentals of electrical power generation and maintenance of electrical power plants. 10. Control systems and control machinery. 11. Quality control analysis. How much money electrical engineers make? According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, electrical engineers earn a median salary of $93,000 per year. Salaries typically start from $59,240 and go up to $146,820. Top 10% of electrical engineers earn a monthly salary of $10,972 or more. In addition, electrical engineers with a master's degree or professional license improve their attractiveness to employers and may qualify for higher wages. The average engineer with a master's degree in any field earns approximately $900 more per month than one with a bachelor's degree. Electrical engineers usually work around 40 hours a week. They may have to work occasional overtime to meet deadlines. They could be based in an office, factory, production plant, workshop, power station, or research facility. Top companies hiring for electrical engineers. The Boeing Company, Lockheed Martin Corporation, International Business Machines Corporation, also known as IBM, Google, Apple, General Electric, and BMW Group. Pros and cons of being an electrical engineer. Pros: high salaries, wide range of career opportunities, job flexibility. Cons: risky occupation, workload can be unpredictable, competitive atmosphere for promotion. However, the advantages of a career in electrical engineering can certainly overcome the disadvantages for someone interested in the field. Future progression. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, employment of electrical and electronics engineers is projected to grow by 4% between now and 2022. The rapid pace of technological innovation and development will likely drive demand for electrical and electronics engineers in research and development. an area in which engineering expertise will be needed to develop distribution systems related to new technologies. Thank you for providing your valuable time to watch this video. Don't forget to subscribe our channel for useful engineering videos.
Doing all sorts of things, from designing parts of aircraft to manufacturing missiles, aerospace engineering seems quite interesting to study and work in. Since every aerospace product is completely different, most engineers focus on just one, whether it be satellites, missiles, or commercial planes. Please bear in mind that these positions are usually affected by national programs and support, so you will have a close connection with the public sector.
Aerospace engineering is broken up into two different main branches, aeronautics and astronautics, which have their similarities and differences. Aeronautics has to do with building and designing things that fly in air, whereas astronautics is about building and designing things that will go into space, which is the focus of this video. For many schools, you would simply enter as an aerospace engineer, then you diverge into the astronautics or aeronautics classes later on. So astronautics would include designing rockets and satellites, or specific things like working on the International Space Station, which is basically one big science lab in space that astronauts stay and perform experiments in. Or maybe the Mars rover that is gathering data from Mars without the need for a human to be there. Now, rockets are made in order to launch space shuttles and satellites into space. Then, for example, those satellites are used for a variety of things, including providing television signal to our homes, taking high-quality images of Earth, forecasting weather, locating our position through GPS satellites, taking scientific data about our land, oceans, or atmosphere, or even for military purposes like reconnaissance, or communicating securely with our troops halfway across the world. In fact, there are over 2,000 satellites currently in orbit, so you can see how astronautical engineering is an important and active field. Now, like I said, astronautical engineering is a branch of aerospace, but within that branch there are many components that you would focus on even more. Remember, spacecrafts are really big, so it takes a lot of people, all with different specialties, to create one. Some of the common subsystems and components I'll cover are propulsion, structure, thermal, attitude determination and control, guidance and navigation, and communications. Now, propulsion, of course, has to do with the propulsion system on the spacecraft that provides the thrust. There aren't too many propulsion methods, but it's all about knowing when to use one over the other and accounting for all the little details. For example, launching a rocket uses a solid fuel, kind of like gunpowder, which is a powerful type of propulsion to overcome gravity on the spacecraft. But if the spacecraft is in orbit, you might need it to change to a different orbit, so you need to determine what propulsion and how much of it is needed to provide the change in velocity that you want. Or in deep space, one method you could use is electric propulsion, which is weak but very efficient. Other details would include shaping and determining the material for the nozzle, sizing the tanks that would hold the fuel, and figuring out how much thrust a certain method could provide. Then structures is about designing the structure of the spacecraft, so actually how it is shaped and how it will stand up to all the forces it's subject to. As you can imagine, just when a rocket is launching, there are lots of vibrations and heavy stress that occur throughout the vehicle, so it's important that everything is designed properly to withstand that. This is also a subsystem that you could see an astronautical or mechanical engineer working on. Thermal is about maintaining heat and temperature properly throughout the entire spacecraft. For example, the electronics, batteries, antenna, and maybe even the people inside the spacecraft need to be kept within a certain temperature. Some components may need to stay colder than others or they will malfunction, so understanding how heat moves throughout a spacecraft is very important. This is something that you could also see an astronautics or mechanical engineer working on. Attitude determination and control is all about controlling the orientation of the spacecraft. Think about the fact that you have to aim a remote control at or near a TV to turn it on. If you just turn or orient it a different way, then it won't work. Well, the same thing goes for a spacecraft orbiting Earth. It may have an antenna on it that has to point at something on Earth to communicate with us. If along its orbit it turns too far, then the antenna may not be able to communicate with what's on Earth, just like the remote control couldn't communicate with the TV. Well, we can mount sensors on the spacecraft that detect when its orientation begins to turn too far. Then we can use devices to provide a torque to get it back to the required orientation. In classes, this involves a lot of looking at coordinate systems and different axes to determine how a spacecraft is oriented mathematically. Guidance and navigation is all about designing the orbit itself, or really just planning out the mission of how the spacecraft will travel. You may need the satellite to be geosynchronous, meaning it takes one day to complete a trip around Earth, so you gotta look at what shape orbit you should have. Or if at some point you just need to change between orbits, the team would have to determine how much change in velocity there needs to be to do so. And lastly, communications is about wireless communication, so that maybe two satellites can communicate with each other, or a satellite can communicate down to a ground station to provide information, whether it be images, sensor data, or audio from someone talking. I only included communications because at some schools, aerospace students may learn some of it, but usually in the real world, this would be best for probably an electrical engineer or similar discipline. So you may really want to work on rockets and other spacecrafts, but it's not that simple because as you can see, there are so many parts of a spacecraft that need to be included, and people sometimes spend an entire career on just one component or subsystem. Now, plenty of engineers work on spacecrafts, from astronautical engineers to computer scientists and computer engineers who need to create the software that will go on board. But as you can see, astronautical engineers work on the bulk of the spacecraft itself. But what's really nice about this major is that if maybe you don't like propulsion, let's say, that's okay because there are plenty of other subsystems you can work on so that you wouldn't even see propulsion in your career. And additionally, if you really like one subsystem, you could spend an entire career on it. Now, if you did want to work on the entire spacecraft, you could get a job as a systems engineer. These are aerospace engineers that know a little about all the components and subsystems instead of being an expert on one. This is kind of what undergrad will prepare you for. They will teach you about all these different subsystems, but won't go into too much depth. Then in your career, or maybe graduate school, you could go into much greater detail on one of the subsystems you find interesting. Now there are some more that I didn't include, like risk and reliability, safety, testing and integration, and some others, but these aren't so much taught in the undergraduate curriculum, but just note how many parts of a spacecraft you could work on if you wanted. So to summarize everything so far, a spacecraft is comprised of many subsystems and components that need experts in each one of those fields. The ones in green that I'll write are what undergrad will focus on the most. Some schools may briefly go into communication and power, which is why I put them in blue, but not all schools will, and if those interest you, then electrical engineering will be better for you. Systems engineers have to know a little about all these subsystems, which is kind of what school prepares you for, like I discussed. But if you want to design the next breakthrough in propulsion, let's say, that will get rockets to much faster speeds, then you'd probably get a master's degree where you'd focus on the propulsion subsystem. Or you could work your way up at a job where you try to focus solely on the propulsion system itself rather than the other ones. Now your curriculum will be very similar to a mechanical engineer. You will learn a little about everything, including fluids, thermodynamics, circuits and electronics, materials science, programming, as well as take about 2 years of calculus. Also, a little more than half of your aerospace engineering classes will be the same as the aeronautics students. You both take a lot of the same major classes, but then you diverge into the astronautics classes where you learn about many of the subsystems discussed earlier. So you will see plenty of math and labs, but also be ready for a lot of MATLAB. I've talked about this briefly before, but for those who don't know, MATLAB is a program that has a lot of math functions built into it that allows graphing in 2 and 3 dimensions and allows you to mathematically model a lot of systems by coding what you need. Like maybe you'd have to model the position and velocity functions of a spacecraft in orbit around Earth. Think of a graphing calculator, but way more advanced, and you will have to do coding to model what you want. So if you're thinking aerospace engineering will just be hands-on and won't be a lot of computer work, you will be surprised when you enter undergrad. Now lastly, some people may struggle between choosing mechanical and aerospace engineering. If this is you, just realize they are very similar in what they do when it comes to the technical work. They both learn thermodynamics, they both analyze the forces and stress within different structures, they learn material properties, they use MATLAB, they do a lot of math, and so on. But astronautical engineers only apply those things to spacecrafts. Then they also go on to take their classes in the subsystems shown earlier that a mechanical engineering student would not see. So mechanical engineers do have a wider range of options in the job market because they could look at the temperature and heat transfer on a car engine as well as a spacecraft. Or they could analyze the forces on a robot or large building as well as a rocket. Astronautical engineers will have more of an advantage when it comes to working on things like the attitude determination and control, the propulsion system, or the orbits, and the other subsystems that are more unique to a spacecraft.
Just think of Mark Zuckerberg, and all your questions will vanish in air. IT professionals get paid quite a lot for their labor. Employers are prepared to pay a high median annual salary even for a college graduates. Chemical engineering graduates can expect to start off with about 65K a year, and their work will involve design, development, and production of various products and chemicals. You can choose any industry you are interested in, including pharmaceutical, energy, food and drink, oil and gas, or plastics.
It's on so many different levels and for so many different kinds of products.
Chemical engineers like Anita combine the principles of chemistry and engineering to scale up the production of materials and consumer products. They work in teams with other engineers, designing and adapting production methods from the small scale in the lab to the large scale at the manufacturing plant.
Everything that touches your life, a chemical engineer had to be there to make it happen. And just knowing that I could be a part of that.
Chemical engineers work in a variety of fields: energy, pharmaceuticals, the environment, biotechnology, consumer products, and a lot more.
It's taking a product and making it for everyone.
Anita is a chemical engineer with Procter & Gamble.
I work in fabric care engineering on the liquids making side. I work on designing and putting in new equipment in the plant, or maybe modifying some old equipment to make new products. Somebody in the products research side or somebody that talks to consumers will come up with an idea.
So what they love is for the product in the bottle to smell great. They also talked about how when they go into their laundry room, they love the smell of that fresh scent and pulling it out of their dryer and being able to smell it.
As we're going and investing in the project, we want to make sure that whatever we do is what the consumer wants.
Chemical engineers are instrumental early on in the process, especially during the research and development phase.
You've made it in a beaker, and that's really cool. But we know we need to make it into many, many, many bottles. Thousands of bottles that we can get to the consumers every day. So how do we scale that up?
With our computer modeling tools, what we've done is we're simulating the injection of this material into our product.
So we're showing that it's really well mixed right now. And I think that's going to be really important for us making our design requirements, that we know we can get this.
Now we can see the rotational movement of the agitator drawing the fluid down, just like the model predicts.
Yeah, I can see it going around getting mixed.
Right. And we can see that the strands are breaking up and being drawn down into the fluid. And after a few minutes, we should see the material dissolve.
When Anita's not meeting with her R&D colleagues in Cincinnati, she's usually working at one of Procter & Gamble's manufacturing sites. Anita is brainstorming with Lauren, another chemical engineer, planning the scale-up of a new product.
This tank right here is free. Probably have to do some changes inside. I mean, what kind of material properties does this have?
So we're thinking this is going to be a kind of thick material.
Okay.
And we're planning to inject it back into our formulas and want to make sure it's homogeneous.
Okay, so we're looking at an agitator, maybe a top-mounted or side-mounted one?
So it looks like the top-mounted is what we're going to want. That's how we're avoiding phase separation right now.
And I picked chemical engineering because it's the most versatile. Like, I can work in product supply, I can work in environment, I can work in the energy sector, I can work in chemical production. I have so many options. You work all day and you produce these things, but then you go to the store and you see it on the shelf and you're like, oh, well, see, I made that. And like my mom will call me up and she'll be like, did you make this new thing? It's awesome. And I'm like, yeah, I did.
During the day, I'm a chemical engineer, but once I go home, I like to do a lot of other things too. I've learned how to cook and I like trying different recipes out and sharing them with my friends. I like to do different types of art. I paint and I do draw. I think one of the most exciting things about my work is it's not just one project, and they might be in different phases.
So after several months of options analysis, we have gotten alignment from our GM on a base plan for this project.
As chemical engineers design their projects, they take into account consumer preferences, implementation costs, and especially plant safety.
We're working on a noise study. We measured what the sound was actually because using the site's official decibel meter, because we did want to get that recorded.
We had it custom made for soundproofing.
We need noise cancellation.
I would research that.
Chemical engineers also make sure their designs are environmentally sustainable.
We're thinking that the batch cycle time is going to take about 75 minutes after unload.
Okay, so we want to try to get that reduced as much as possible if they can.
Everything in life is about chemistry, and we need to understand how to control it and make it work in a clean, green, and efficient way, right? Sustainability is a huge thing now.
Chemical engineers typically have a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering, and some go on to receive a master's degree in chemical engineering.
But being an engineer isn't just about math and science, you know. You do want to have a good basis in other things like history and English and being able to communicate well. You know, you have to think a little bit outside the box. I think the most rewarding thing about being a chemical engineer is that you can see what you make. Being creative is being an engineer.
Working with nuclear energy, these engineers derive benefits from radiation and research and develop systems, equipment, and tools for putting nuclear resources to the good use. For example, in medicine and industrial engineering. Their services are highly sought after regardless of whether you have a master's or bachelor's degree, but is one of the riskier engineering careers you can find.
Aside the politics for the sake of science and engineering and just say countries mainly use them as a deterrent. Yes, a deterrent. A little naive, but let's go with it for now. Besides, most countries have signed a non-proliferation treaty. Basically, they're not allowed to test their weapons. But what about deep underground? Surely they can test it there. Well, no. They have monitors everywhere. You'll be detected by other countries in minutes, if not seconds. So, if we can't test the weapon in the desert like they used to, or deep underground, how do you know if what you have even works? Well, you have to test individual parts of the weapon, or even simulate what it would be like. Like using lasers that can heat objects to temperatures hotter than the centre of the sun. Why? Well, when the weapon goes off, you can expect temperatures to exceed tens of millions degrees. Now that's far hotter than the centre of the sun. And this type of research is also being used to better technology, helping mankind move into the future. But how exactly? How would this help anyone? Well, through something called fusion, but we'll get into that a little later. For now, let's talk about fission and how it produces energy for nuclear power. So how does it work? Well, by splitting uranium atoms, you can produce a tremendous amount of heat. Now, when this is contained correctly, you can circulate water around it, which of course turns to steam with enough heat. Now with this steam, you channel it through a turbine, and voila, you guessed it, electricity. Now, this sounds simple, but the complexity begins when making this process safe. We've had two pretty bad accidents in the past, Fukushima and Chernobyl. These both caused thousands of casualties and affected millions of people. There are some good videos on YouTube that explain what went wrong on those days, what nuclear engineers have learnt from it, and ultimately how we can ensure nothing on this scale happens again. Nuclear energy is favoured today because it doesn't release any greenhouse gases, but instead produces radioactive waste. Now this is deadly stuff and needs to be stored deep underground for some years before it's considered safe. So this takes us back to our earlier question. How can we take mankind into the future? Instead of splitting atoms, what if we fuse them together? Well, our sun does exactly this. Remember when we briefly mentioned fusion? Well, this is it, a new type of nuclear power. With very little waste and almost free energy for everyone, the possibilities for this is unreal. What we learned from simulating nuclear explosions can bring us closer to understanding fusion and put this power on the grid, making these possibilities real. Aside from trying to bring free energy to everyone, nuclear engineers can also be found in the medical industry. I know what you're thinking. Weapons of mass destruction, Fukushima and Chernobyl, how could they possibly operate in the medical industry? Well, they continue to look into how small controlled amounts of radioactive material can help patients, like making cancer show it better on scans, or even treating it altogether. So yeah, if you were to stare at a block of uranium-235, you're definitely going to run into a few problems. But this whole stereotype of nuclear engineering being bad just isn't the case. When engineers safely channel it correctly, it can do a lot of good. In fact, very soon we'll be pretty reliant on it. And this is really what engineers do. They take these incredible principles and make them work safely. You know, we can't let anything go wrong. You remember when Otto Octavius messed up his calculations? Yeah, you really don't want to end up like.
The most appealing science degree in terms of money is petroleum engineering. As you have already guessed by its name, petroleum engineers search for natural reservoirs of petroleum and then help recover it. If you are considering studying this type of engineering, don't forget that knowledge of chemistry, math, and geology are also needed. Nevertheless, average annual salaries provided by a company are more than enough to justify the intellectual investment. At the same time, it is a real challenge.
Engineers design and develop methods for extracting oil and gas from deposits below the Earth's surface. Petroleum engineers also find new ways to extract oil and gas from older wells. The demand for petroleum engineers have been growing by double digits annually in recent years. There is no doubt that petroleum engineers have a very high job security due to the fact that the oil is still among the most needed commodities in the world. According to a research conducted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, petroleum engineers earned an average annual salary of $128,230 in 2016. Despite the fact that oil prices are going up and down, the highest paying countries for petroleum engineers have a high need for this profession. Also, petroleum engineers have a lot of opportunities for career movement in the industry. Here, in this video, we are providing the top 10 highest paying countries for petroleum engineers. Please note that the information for the average salary per country is obtained from the Society of Petroleum Engineers and Hayes Oil and Gas Global Salary Guide.